Loki has become one of my favorite MCU characters. And yeah, some of that's just thanks to the amazing performance by Tom Hiddleston. But I think what really makes him so great is how relatable he is if you have ever been labeled different or treated like an outcast. Throughout the movies, we have seen Loki struggle with being the black sheep of his family. The Loki series on Disney Plus gave us a deeper look into his character with the introduction of the Time Variance Authority, or the TVA for short. Since characters are often defined partially through their enemies, especially in comics, I think this really helped flesh out who Loki is. I mean, what could be a better antagonist for someone who represents chaos than the TVA? An organization designed to control what is or is not allowed to happen across all of time, essentially making everything predetermined, because anything the TVA does not approve of will be destroyed. So in this video, I want to explore Loki and being an outcast, how his pursuit of success and the challenges he faces against systems like the TVA are so relatable.
I am Loki, and I am burdened with glorious purpose.
Let him do.
Never mind.
We all need somewhere we belong. People that accept us unconditionally. It's what makes us feel connected, gives us
glorious purpose.
Loki did not have this feeling of acceptance growing up, especially from his father Odin. Loki and his brother Thor were raised in an extremely competitive environment where only one of them would be the winner and get to rule Asgard. This sense of competition isn't great for either brother. It implies conditional acceptance. If you win, you're accepted. If not, you're a failure. Unfortunately, this is something we all have to face to varying degrees. We live in a constant state of competition. Some will succeed while others are left out in the cold. Quite literally, as even survival is conditional. Hopefully, you at least have someone you can turn to that will accept you unconditionally. For many, this will be family. For some of us, we will have to find or make our own communities. It's important to have somewhere we ultimately feel loved and accepted for who we are, even when we mess up. A much needed refuge, if you will, from the harsher world around us that gives us a space to feel safe where we can recover and grow. The closest Loki has is his brother Thor.
Never one for sentiment, were you?
Easier to let it burn.
I agree.
Thor, over time, has learned to have healthier boundaries and doesn't let Loki hurt him, while also not forsaking Loki. Thor shows a lot of love to his brother here, and I think this ultimately helped Loki grow. If a competition for the throne had not been placed between them, I like to imagine Loki and Thor would have had an incredibly healthy relationship, especially given how close they remain even after their battles against each other.
Brothers forever!
Brothers forever!
But in the MCU timeline, we have the conflict for the throne. And the thing is, seeing how loved Thor was, I doubt Loki ever felt he really had a chance to inherit the throne. Why would Odin ever pick the black sheep over the golden child? This creates inner turmoil for Loki. He wants to be accepted and not feel like an outcast. Yet the only path that has been laid out for him is impossible. And if the outcome feels predetermined, does anything you do really matter?
Dear brother, becoming predictable. I trust you. You betray me round and round in circles we go.
Loki has done a ton of awful things he should be held accountable for. But if you start to internalize that you have no agency in your life, it becomes difficult to learn from your mistakes. If no matter what you do results in a negative outcome, how do you know which situations were your fault and which ones you had no control over? Not to mention, the fear of punishment and rejection can keep us from reflecting on what we have done. While some people may give up and do nothing when they feel helpless, others may act in more extreme ways because they are frustrated, angry, and hurt. Lashing out can give a sense of control, hope for proof that their actions do have consequences, even if they are negative. I don't think Loki really believes any harm will ever come to his brother Thor or his family.
I don't enjoy hurting people.
Okay, explain that to me.
He loves them, but he needs to try to win to prove them all wrong, even if deep down Loki believes he will ultimately lose. So, Loki continually escalates what he does. as if to scream, "I have an impact in the world. What I do matters." Loki gets to see his actions can have a lasting effect, but not in the way he hoped.
You might want to take the stairs to the left.
Loki's obsession with finding a
Glorious purpose.
is an attempt to rationalize how he feels he's been treated his whole life. That he must be going through all of this for a reason. It is hard to accept awful stuff can just happen to us for no reason at all. If we experience hardship, our brains want to rationalize it. When we are young, we are taught the world is just. This is often done through the use of punishments and rewards. Because in a just world, good things happen to good people, and bad things happen to bad people. Now, if a bad thing happens to us occasionally, it's not going to shake our belief in a just world, because we can write it off as bad luck. But if bad stuff happens regularly, it can quickly feel we deserve it, that we must be bad. It also doesn't help when there is a relative like Thor who seemingly can do no wrong and is regularly rewarded, because it reinforces the idea that if they're good, then you must be bad. Especially if you get actively compared with them.
I never wanted the throne! I only ever wanted to be your equal.
Believing we must be inherently bad is an unhealthy response called assimilation, where we twist events that happened so they fit the belief system we already hold. Like, maybe my family isn't abusive, I'm just really getting what I deserve. We may also change our beliefs in other harmful ways. Like, if bad things keep happening to us despite us believing we are a good person, then maybe the real truth is nothing in the world is fair or safe. This can make us anxious and less trusting because we want to avoid anything that could cause us harm, which can in turn lead to isolation.
You are alone, and you always will be.
Loki assumes everyone will leave him, so they become pawns to manipulate in his desperate hope that he must have a
Glorious purpose.
It's really hard to break out of this once we internalize we are bad, or that the world is always unfair. So now, let's talk about some of the ways these beliefs get ingrained in us.
I'm a trickster. Yes, so mischievous.
When I think of Loki's title, I'm reminded of how we label others. Disobedient, a troublemaker, mischievous, or just bad. And if we are assigned a negative label, whether we deserved it or not, it's extremely hard to get rid of. The label itself makes change difficult because it informs people's expectations and how they interact with us. For example, if we are called a failure, there are two likely outcomes. If we fail, we get remarks confirming it was expected of us. If we do something right, we get remarks of surprise. Both of these reactions confirm the validity of the label. These labels simplify explaining the behavior people don't like about us, rather than treating the behavior like a symptom to investigate. And it's quite easy to be labeled through no fault of our own, especially as children. Behavior that is inconvenient will often get a child labeled as difficult, if not far worse, and result in being punished. As if adding stress or pain is somehow going to solve a behavior that could be caused just by being tired or hungry. Hell, sometimes we punish kids just for acting their age. But even with more troubling behavior, there is often more to the story.
I love snakes, so I went to pick up the snake to admire it, and he transformed back into himself, and he was like, "Yeah, it's me," and he stabbed me. We were 8 at the time.
When I heard this, I thought of children with traumatic pasts whose behavior is crying for help. When you think about it, Loki had a very traumatic childhood. He was taken from his home as a baby and then had his identity hidden from him.
I knew I was adopted.
What? They told you?
Yeah.
You don't have to remember something for it to be traumatic. Many traumatic events for children are often overlooked, assuming if they cannot remember it, it's fine. As if all that matters is a child survives those early years and not how they were treated. Of course, not every child that gets labeled will have such a traumatic past, but a child may be labeled difficult simply because they don't fit into what is considered normal, like being disabled or neurodivergent. We can't all meet the standards that society has, just like Loki and Thor can't both be king. So what happens to those of us who don't quite fit in the sacred timeline?
Somebody just bombed the sacred timeline.
In the Loki series, we meet Sylvie. She was taken from her parents by the TVA when she was young and has been forced to run from one cataclysmic event to another to avoid detection. Meaning, since she was little, she's never been able to form any connections and has had to watch entire civilizations and people get wiped out over and over again. It can be frightening to imagine our own future and the catastrophic direction we seem to be taking. I cannot fathom witnessing it play out across many worlds over and over again for years and years. Sylvie doesn't even know what she did for the TVA to come after her.
What was my Nexus event?
I don't remember.
Perhaps it was simply existing as a woman version of Loki, or maybe it's just because she had parents who were loving and supportive. Sylvie's situation feels like an analogy for what many of us experience in our world, because most of us are always living on the edge of certain end of the world moments, meaning we are only ever a few bad events from our lives as we know it being over. And once you fall off the sacred timeline, it can be incredibly lonely, especially as others may actively distance themselves from us, afraid that we will hurt their own chances to be successful and stay on that sacred timeline.
Very subtle. Well done.
I don't want anybody out there to forget what you are.
There doesn't need to be a mastermind like Kang behind the TVA in our world. There are systems in place to uphold the sacred timeline, and those who are able to do well within this framework have no reason to act against their own interest and disrupt the way things are done. In the United States, the traditional path for success for the longest time has been to do well in school, go to college, get a job, get married, have 2.5 kids, and if you're lucky, you may even get to retire. Anything you do that doesn't coincide with this path will bring scrutiny. Get a bad grade? Don't you know you need good grades to get into college? You're going to ruin your life. And over time, more and more is expected of us. You're only good in good grades? What about extracurricular activities? You have your whole life ahead of you, and you don't want to screw it up. This can create a fear of failure quite early in life, even if you never really got a chance to start on the standard path simply because of who you are. Like, not everyone wants to get married and have kids, but our culture pushes this focus on what's supposedly normal as indicators for potential success. I also have to ask, even if this path was possible for everyone, is it reasonable for us to have systems that can snowball so early on? Humans are not particularly good at long-term decision making, and our brains don't even fully develop on average until age 25. Not to mention how little agency we have in determining our environment or outcomes when we are children. Yet the simplest of things can result in falling off this path.
Or we're just late for work. Whatever it was, stepping off your path created a Nexus event.
After which can begin a downward spiral because everything continually gets more difficult. If you're unable to finish high school because you are forced to work a low-paying job just to try to survive, you're going to be pretty short on time and money, which are the resources you need to be able to invest in yourself. You could even do everything correct, and what is considered successful changes. For example, what if you went to school and trained for a job that is no longer needed or in demand? All of this creates an immense amount of fear and pressure, which we have very little control over. It can feel like we're drowning as the system around us just rewards those who are already doing well. Like, imagine you're underwater struggling to hold on to the little bit of air you have left, and you see people swimming above you being handed life preservers. On top of this, we're going to be pressured by people who care for us or have authority over us, like parents and teachers. They're well aware of the dangers in not staying on that sacred timeline and don't want that to happen to us. I mean, look at the life Sylvie has had to live.
And so that's where I grew up. The ends of 1,000 worlds.
The adults in our lives may even resort to punishment and other coercive methods due to their fear. It speaks volumes to me that as a society, we can rationalize harming someone as a preemptive action to prevent harm we think might happen to them, thus guaranteeing them harm, as opposed to changing the systems that fail them. The classic forcing the square peg in the round hole, rather than changing the hole so both square and round pegs can get through. To make things worse, this fear adults have for our future success can extend to literally anything that could make us different. Being neurodivergent, trans, queer, hell, sometimes just having the wrong hobbies. They don't want us to be labeled a variant. I've even seen parents avoid getting a diagnosis for their child, or worse, get one and not share that information with their child, afraid that the label will be used as an excuse or that it will bring mistreatment from others. On top of that, telling no one doesn't mean they won't get labeled. They'll just be misinformed labels instead, like difficult, lazy, or worse. All this really does is put us in Sylvie's shoes, knowing we are being treated differently but having no idea why. I can still remember all the ways I was labeled or treated in school. Not knowing I was autistic did not do me any favors. Now, to be clear, it's perfectly reasonable for caregivers to worry about difficulties a child may face. They don't want children to experience hardships like they did, and since they feel powerless to change the systems, they try to change the children. So let's talk about some of the systems that cause this fear in the first place. Schools are one of the first systems we all experience that begins pruning people from the sacred timeline. While many teachers as individuals might care if a child is struggling, the schooling system at large does not. It cares more about attendance and grades. These metrics can be used by a school to get more resources, or in the case of private schools, just ask for more tuition money. After all, the schools with the best grades and attendance must be doing the best job, right? Or they might be incentivized to do whatever they can to make those metrics look better. Then there are schools that have historically been designed to weed out specific types of children that were in some way deemed not fit for society. Disabled students sent to different institutions. Residential schools for indigenous people to try to erase their culture. Unimaginable harm was done at these types of institutions. And while it may take different forms, much harm is still being done today. Disciplinary actions disproportionately target the disabled, neurodivergent, and children of color, as well as other marginalized groups, including restraint and seclusion, which is still being practiced in many schools, which can result in serious harm or even death. Needless to say, I was not that surprised when we learned Ravonna Renslayer, who is a fanatical judge serving the TVA, used to be a high school principal.
Judge Renslayer.
What? Who are you? And what the hell are you doing in my school?
While this all starts in schools, it goes far beyond. These same kids likely to receive harsher disciplinary actions in school will likely have their actions criminalized, sometimes directly for failures in school. This is often referred to as the school to prison pipeline. And then once in the prison system, it is very hard to get out. It's not enough to punish someone, society wants them permanently removed. Of course, there are many other ways to end up in prison, but the dynamic is the same. Instead of helping those in need, we use a system of punishment to get rid of them. Don't have money for food? We will throw you in prison for trying to survive. Don't have a house? We'll make architecture and laws to make your very existence a crime, or at least extremely clear that you are not wanted. And laws will often be crafted to target groups of people, or at very least be disproportionately enforced. I'm sure most are familiar with the disparity and history of the war on drugs by now. We still have people doing life sentences in jail for weed, while others are able to create profitable businesses around it. Prisons themselves are a multi-billion-dollar industry, creating incentives to increase incarceration. Some of these profits come from the cheap labor pool the prison population provides. Thanks to a loophole in the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery, but still allows slave labor to exist so long as we have an excuse to lock you up first. And it's not hard to find reasons to lock someone up. Hell, when slavery was abolished, we made vagrancy laws to arrest former slaves for not having jobs, meaning they could still be forced into slave labor. Much like with the disciplinary actions in schools, the prison population disproportionately affects marginalized people too. It's scary to be targeted by these systems, so it's not surprising that people are pushed to great lengths to avoid being labeled a variant, even choosing to join these systems to help oppress others, so you are seen as useful. One of my favorite reveals in the Loki series is that all the TVA workers are variants. They can't even remember their lives and what made them meaningful. Their entire existence is now about their job.
How do you not know what a fish is?
I lived my entire life behind a desk.
We also see how the TVA uses bureaucracy to give its cruelty a veil of legitimacy. Like, Loki goes through this entire process to have a trial, but it's all for show. There are only 2 outcomes, and the variants have no way to defend themselves, or really any idea what's even going on. Meanwhile, the TVA workers are just doing what they think is necessary. They have learned to not empathize with the people who go through the system and just focus on doing their jobs. It reminds me of a quote by human rights lawyer Becca Heller from the Netflix documentary about ICE called Immigration Nation. I think the brilliance of any bureaucratic system whose net result is fear and trauma is that it's big enough to break it down such that everyone just thinks they're only moving papers or only doing a little piece. And a very small number of people at the time have designed the system such that an incredible amount of terror and trauma results, but most people are completely divorced from that. We are surrounded by systems that divide us by otherizing entire groups of people. These systems are designed to make us fearful of change, because if we are not a variant, or at least able to fit in enough, we're benefiting in some way. And if we were to change the systems, we would have to admit to ourselves that all of the harm done so far wasn't necessary. But for the people marginalized the most, it's easy to see we can't keep doing things this way. Since we can't exactly just tear the whole thing down, what can we do in the meantime? For starters, I hope we can remind ourselves to question what is defined as successful and what that success actually means. It can be tempting to see people doing well as inherently admirable or somehow better than everyone else, like they must be doing something right to get where they are. Or conversely, look down on those who have been labeled negatively or aren't doing well. This goes for ourselves as well. We shouldn't look at traditional success as a metric for our own self-worth. We need to determine for ourselves what we consider successful and work towards that, because each of our abilities and access to resources like time and money are going to be very different. And it's worth noting this will also fluctuate day to day, especially if you're disabled. I wonder what it would have looked like if Loki had done this and just walked away from Asgard. He probably would have been a lot happier in the end, but it's also not an easy decision to make. There is a real possibility that choosing our own path will not be accepted. We may lose friends and family over those choices, and I completely understand if that risk feels too great. We shouldn't have to weigh our safety versus our happiness, but unfortunately, for many of us, that is something we have to consider. For me, wanting to be treated decently meant losing almost all of my family, but I wish I had made that decision sooner. It hurt a lot, but then I could have started making lasting connections with people who actually accepted me sooner. Unfortunately, there's no easy answer. I don't think I should have given up right away, but I definitely wasn't doing myself any favors putting up with awful treatment or being unable to be myself for as many years as I did. So if you're stuck in that kind of scenario, I just want to say there are amazing people out there who can relate to what you're going through. There is a strong connection in being vulnerable with people you share lived experiences with. I have personally met amazing people in the autistic, disabled, and trans communities. Marginalized people have been forgotten by the systems, so we've had to prop up our own communities to survive. Meanwhile, those who were allowed to remain on the sacred timeline will tell us it's too dangerous to change, fearful of what will happen to themselves and the ones they love if it goes away, but won't consider all the possibilities and people that have been ended to uphold it. They'll claim that everyone got here through merit, when really the system
paved the road. You
He just walked down it.
Sure, they still had to put in that effort to walk through, but others never even had a chance. Being different shouldn't be something we have to fear. Diversity is good. It makes our communities stronger, more creative, more resilient, and much more. So if you are a variant, remember, there are others like you. We can be there for each other.
You'll always be the god of mischief, but you could be more.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and a special thanks to our patrons. If you don't want to see this video pruned, consider hitting the thumbs up. And if you'd like our future videos to stay on your YouTube sacred timeline, subscribe and click that bell. I also want to recommend Leslie XP's channel. She explores a lot of topics regarding disability in more detail than I do. I helped edit on the latest video she did responding to Vox's Explain show about designer babies and modifying DNA, which coincidentally is pretty relevant to this video as well as my Hawkeye video. So if you'd like to learn more on the subject regarding disability and eugenics, you should definitely check it out. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you're not alone.